Welcome back to Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? Anime Review, episode number 16. This episode is basically the 32nd episode of the anime, Dix Pritz, The Dreams of Beast. This one adapts from the second half of chapter 10. Though, unlike last week where they cut very little out of it, this week they cut like a big chunk of the chapter. Oh my gosh, I just basically kind of reread the chapter quickly, and from what I could tell, they cut a big chunk of this of the second half of this chapter. What happened? Now, mostly put in the case of what goes on with Belle in this episode, that's almost everything for that related to that particular section of the episode. That's entirely in, which I gotta give praise to the anime for keeping all that in. They do cut out something, I'll get to that right now. There's a fight between the Ganesha family and the monsters, where most of the fight happens off screen, which that's kind of dumb in the form of the anime for doing that. I'm not sure why they did this for, because in the book itself there's a lot more happening here, and when you see Lude, Andromeda, that's Harmony's assistant, and Asia, two of those were defeated off screen. I'm like, okay, what the heck happened here? Like, did the anime just cut out like a big chunk of the chapter? And yeah, they did. Like, you see a fight, and then most of the fight apparently takes place off screen, which that's weird. Why the heck the anime would do that for, I have no idea. Includes Lude herself is seen very briefly in the episode. This stuff for her from the chapter is mostly there, but a lot of it was cut out for, like, no reason at all. I mean, last week, Andromeda was seen under a cloak, and here she's seen where she's been beaten by a monster. And I'm like, okay, what the heck happened here that caused basically to be cut out? No idea. But that is the only negative I have for this episode. Is they have this big fight that happens in the second half of chapter 10, and you barely cover it in this episode. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that in the case of what goes on with Belle in this episode, yeah, all the stuff in the Belle, Dom, Dix, Pricks, yeah, that all stuff mostly put is there. I think they cut out some minor stuff here and there. Like, for example, they do cut a little portion of some portions here and there after. Like, first you see Belle automatically fighting Dix throughout the episode, and of course she's slicing part of his outfit off. They don't have Belle's inner thoughts, which that's fine, don't really see it. You can tell by his thing he's basically kind of desperate trying to avoid all of his attacks. And eventually takes him a corridor where he sees Winnie. Yep, sees Winnie. And basically Dick says something completely unforgettable. And yes, he does this in the book too. And what happens next is from the book itself, which I gotta praise the fact they kept this in, because I'm sure this was very important they had to keep this in. Basically, he removes the velvet tear that was basically in Winnie's forehead. He removes it forcibly, and then she transforms into a snake-like monster, where she basically harms Belle, but Belle basically doesn't want to fight her at all because of how close she is to her. And heck, he has a line in the anime as well where you have a hot spot monster. Basically a monster fetish, which in this anime is basically a no-no. You cannot have that at all. Other series don't have really a big problem with it at all. Like for example, Monster Musume, almost all the girls are monsters, which I don't have a big problem with that at all. I mean, it's how people feel. So then of course, then the fight gets taken out of there, and of course, then Lude, who's sort of in a way fighting the curse, is able to fend off Winnie. Then, of course, they basically beat up Dick, so he gets thrown against a freaking wall, which that somehow breaks the curse. And mostly then they briefly fight Winnie, and then she gets away. And most of the stuff that happens next is still straight from the book. Like, they don't really change much anything here. Like, they cut out some minor bit, basically. And then we see Dix, where he goes on a tunnel, he disappears. And now in the book itself, it explains, because they cut out the mentioning about Delos' handbook. Yeah, his notebook, which in the book it's explained that he actually he was forcibly read that he was sick. So he knows basically the lab in the back of his hand. which in the anime, they barely mention it at all. I mean, as soon as Dick disappears down that corridor, he's never seen again for the rest of the episode. One of his subordinates is, one was sliced up by one of the Xenos, and that's it. I'm like, really? Yeah, that's another thing they cut from this episode. Is Dick's what he was doing like right after he ran that way. You see him brief. He's actually in the chapter briefly right after that, where he basically knows where to get out of the thing, and he's on his way back to his home to basically heal his injuries. Which that's what he's doing. In the episode, there's no mention of that. Not at all. I'm not really sure why. And when he goes down a corridor, where does this corridor lead to? It's a straight shot to the surface. Yep, so Bell basically, who's injured, follows her. Vel basically goes follow him too. Now, they actually do cut a small portion here, because basically, who's supposed to go out of the tunnel? Next thing you see is Vel's healing Bell's injuries, and then basically him saying, seriously? Wait, after he says thank you. And now you're probably thinking, why would he say this? Why would he say, seriously? Because in the book, he was basically like, seriously? I'm like nearly exhausted here, and you're basically running that fast? Yeah, that's what he was thinking in the book. In the anime, it just, why the heck would he say that for? It makes no freaking sense. And then we see the Hestia Familia walking down Deadlift Street, looking for basically the entrance, basically where the enemy's base is, and then somehow Winnie basically is seen like attacking people randomly. Of course, at first they didn't recognize who she is until Himiko basically mentions that this is Winnie. Everybody's shocked to see that, and then Belle shows up, and of course Belle tells her to get to a safe place, which he does do in the book too. And then he's basically hold her off. And then she's attacked by a freaking spear. And Belle looks over and it's a Loki Familia. Now, in the anime, they don't say their names, but viewers know who these people are. It's Loki Familia. And basically in the book he notes, oh look, it's all a bunch of level 6s. And then of course Belle basically stands in front of Winnie. And well, the stuff with Hermes and Icos is taken from the book as well. There are a little couple moments in the episode. Really no change at all. It's still the same as in the book. And basically, Hermes proclaimed that he's basically a fool. And the book says he's foolish. And that's where the episode ends. Yep, interesting though, Belle is going up against Ainz at this point. I gotta say, what they adapted for the episode, what they didn't skip over, I think they did a fantastic job with it, keeping a lot of the stuff related to Belle in here. Like, I would say, like, they kept pretty much everything. Like, all the sections of the second half of Chapter 10 that involved Belle, they kept in. I would say they cut out, like, one small portion of it. Like, a couple small portions, that's mostly it. I would say the biggest thing they cut out, overall, was the Canadian fight with the monsters in the second half of the chapter, where most of it happens off screen. I would say that's the only negative for this episode, but all in all, fantastic episode. Definitely looking forward to next week, which is called Belle Coronel, aka The Fool. That's another name for this episode. That's something interesting though about this anime, where each of the episodes kind of has two titles with it. You have the main title, and then you have basically in parentheses The Fool, which is actually the name of, believe it or not, Chapter 10 of the book. Basically, that's from the second half of Chapter 9. Yeah, so pretty much with this episode, they've already finished up Chapter 9, and they're on to Chapter 10. Which Chapter 10 is not really very long. Well, actually, it's quite long. Not as long as Chapter 9. The chapter itself is 55 pages. Would it be possible they could adapt the whole chapter next episode? It's possible. And they're probably going to wrap up this book, presumably, if they do it like this, where they will presumably probably won't wrap up at chapter, like, if somehow that book 10 be wrapped up in next week's episode, it'd be surprising. But if it isn't, maybe 34 basically would adapt the epilogue plus the first chapter of book 11, which is, by the way, it's shorter than this book. Yeah, basically, this is the book, basically, it was adapted for this episode. Now, basically, The book itself is only like 295 pages. It's quite lengthy, about 300-page book. And so far, they've covered this book in mostly about 4 or 5 episodes, I think so. Yeah, and the book is still not finished being adapted yet. So, presumably next week they might finish up. I don't know. It's possible. But it all depends upon what the anime wants to do. Yep. So yeah, that's it for single overview, and that's probably going to be it for videos today because, well, I'm going to be heading back to the series, well, Kokusai Level 4 probably tomorrow. Well, there's pretty much like 5 more dev episodes left before I pretty much finish it up. So I'll probably do reviews for that tomorrow, probably at least 2. And the other thing else for review-wise coming tomorrow is probably Case Closed, and that's probably it. Yep. But see you in the next video. Bye.